Hi everyone, and thanks for being with me. This has been a remarkable day given the election in the United States, and I wanted to use this opportunity to talk to you live. It's not often that I do a live feed, because every time I do one I tend to stuff it up. So I'm doing this one because later on this afternoon I'm also going to do a live feed with Avery Hilditch, who's a guy that has some interesting things to say about politics in general, and so he and I are getting together for a chat, and I was going to use this opportunity just to kind of experiment, just to let my thoughts out in relation to the election of Trump. So stay tuned, because it's going to be an interesting time together. So I wanted to have a conversation about how you may have responded to the election, or to Trump's win in particular. What does that mean to you, and how did you feel about Trump winning? So there are a number of people who watch my feed who I think are generally pretty excited about the fact that Trump has won, and I'm interested in what makes you feel excited about that. I'm also going to have a discussion with you about how I felt and why I felt the way that I did. Now, I had also just recently watched Kamala Harris's concession speech, and there are some interesting aspects of that I thought that needed to be noted. Number one is that as they panned across the crowd, there were many people who were crying, who had tears streaming down their faces, who were upset by what had just happened. And I can understand that. The loss of any competition can be catastrophic, whether it be a sport event or a political event. Either way, it can be extremely emotional. I know that I have experienced that in terms of some sporting events or some sporting clubs that I support that have not quite made the grade 2. Every time a football match is played with my beloved Crows and they lose, I have in the past felt extremely emotional. In fact, I used to say that I used to get depressed around all of that when that happened some time ago. But these days, I am a bit more circumspect about how I feel about events that are happening in my life, particularly sporting events, where they're not going to necessarily make or break us. They're not going to change our society. They're not going to affect the way we govern and run our lives. But political events, such as what just happened in the United States, is something that is likely to impact all of us. So when I was reflecting on how I felt about this horrific experience, I must confess I felt a degree of sadness, a grief, if you like, a loss for something that I thought was important. Now, when one thinks about it, who really cares what happens in the United States in relation to, because I live in Australia, so why is it that I would necessarily care about what may be happening in the United States? Well, the reality is I do, because what happens politically in the US tends to affect all of us. Now, there are a number of aspects to all of this. I feel distressed that a person such as Donald Trump could be permitted to be in control of the most powerful nation on this planet. I find it almost abhorrent to consider that a man who has been found guilty of so many charges, felony charges, a man who has been found guilty or alleged guilty, I guess, by a civil court of raping a woman. A man who speaks in terms which are denigrating, that are humiliating, that are putting down other people, that a man who wants to be able to become a dictator, whether it be in one day or longer. A man who supports a program such as Project 2025, whereby it is obvious that they want to control a government They want a government that controls the people, that are not necessarily looking after the best interests of their populace, but in fact are endeavouring to cement their power and their influence on a country simply for power's sake and power alone. I'm distressed because there are so many things that could have gone differently. That I'm distressed, I think, that the United States, the people in the US, are extremely narrow-minded. That they could not see, they found it impossible, in fact, to be able to understand that someone like Kamala Harris, who may not be the world's greatest candidate, I agree, that may have had some flaws in terms of the way she managed a certain number of instances, and particularly the fact that I think that she wasn't as progressive as she could have been. That there are certainly, with all her flaws, I actually at the end of the day think that she's a good person who had the best of intentions for those people that she was representing in the United States. I also think that the Democrats have failed to connect with ordinary, everyday, working class people, which used to be who the Democrats associated with or aligned with to a large extent. But that somehow has changed. They now have become elitist. And I think that to some extent that is the way they've been painted by the Republican Party. Whereas the Republican Party has become a demagogish party that has just wanted to focus on the cult that is Donald Trump. And that is unhealthy for any democracy, because over time, that democracy, if it's cultist in nature, will eventually fall and fail. So why would I in Australia be concerned about all of this? One of the primary reasons I think for that concern is the impact that it's going to have on us. And I could list a whole host of areas whereby this may impact you and I, as remote as I might be. And that is, well, trade. So there will be a trade war against China. I think that's quite inevitable. There will be a withdrawal of funding for Ukraine, also inevitable. And one needs to think about the damage that that will do to the European alliances that sit around Ukraine, particularly NATO, and how that will embolden Putin to be able to look at other countries over which they can start to take control as well, such as Poland. and there are there's many areas in which Trump, if he implements his policies, will affect many people. And there's even the sending people, rounding up people in the United States and who are of a different colour or a different religion, or who Trump and his colleagues simply see as different to them. There's also another important issue, I think, and that is the demise of democracy in the US. Over time, what we will find is that the US will become less understanding, less empathetic, that the US will make decisions that will affect the way they manage the media. And one of my concerns has been this continual assertion that the media are the enemy of the people. And what does that mean? Like, how does Trump make decisions about how to get rid of that particular enemy? Does he find ways to dispose of their licenses so that they can't, MSNBC and CNN and the Wall Street Journal and others cannot do what they do? What does it mean about journalism and the reporting of whatever might be happening in a Trump presidency that needs to be reported but won't be? What does it mean also about the rule of law? Now, Trump himself has got some 32, 34 felony charges against him, what's ever going to happen to them? They're going to be dismissed. He's going to appoint an Attorney General who's just simply going to do whatever he suggests that they do. He's not going to go to jail, that is for sure, and that the rule of law will simply mean that at the end of the day, he could do whatever he wants to do. And we know this because the Supreme Court has also weighed in on this particular issue. Now, for me, I don't know what that specifically means. Now, there's a part of me that says, let's wait and see. We can make assertions about the worst things that this guy can do. But we also need to understand that we should not become so fearful of Trump that we sit back and I guess allow our fears to take over. Trump has, for the 9 years that he's been around, whatever, he's focused very much on fear and anger, and particularly in the last, over this campaign, on retribution. And I guess it's important that we don't buy into some of that as well. But we do keep him to account for all the things that he does. Not may do, but the actual things he does. So if Trump goes after immigrants, that needs to be reported. If he starts to find ways to lock up his enemies, of course that needs to be reported. If the trade war increases to an extent that it creates a recession, then clearly that needs to be reported. But at what point do we make him become accountable for any of those things? And if the press is unable to report them, and part of this issue that we have with regard to Trump is that the press, I believe, on both sides, has failed to make him accountable for some of the things that Trump has done. So, should we make him accountable? Of course we should. Will the press be able to do that? I'm not too sure anymore whether the press will be there. At the moment, it's like, was it the Wall Street Journal who decided that they weren't going to endorse a candidate, that they were just going to take a neutral position, which I technically agree with anyway, but whereby a number of people objected to that. The question really became, why is it they chose to do that? And the answer, I think, is because they're fearful of what Trump may do. Now, how can you operate in any civil society where those people that hold such power, such as the Fourth Estate, why is it that they should be fearful? And how will that govern their decision-making? If they're fearful that they may lose their license, if they're fearful that they might lose advertisers, if they're fearful that there will be some form of retribution about speaking out against the authority that is the government. If that becomes the norm, then the United States is in a great deal of trouble. And we over here in Australia need to be mindful of all of this, not just because the rule of law is going to be twisted, that people will not have the authority to be able to say the things that they need to say because they'll be so fearful, that information will not be able to get back to us in other countries about what's actually happening in the United States. Because of all of those reasons, we need to be mindful that at the end of the day, the decisions that are made in the US will be decisions that will affect most of us. Now, here in Australia, we're reliant on the US for much of the security that they offer us in the Pacific, and we need to be cautious because that's likely to be withdrawn from us. Now, there's a debate around AUKUS and whether or not that is something that we should be focused on. In my view, we shouldn't rely on the United States for that at all. But the United States has a whole lot of bases in Australia. Will we become more reliant on the United States in terms of those bases and the information that we provide through our gathering of satellite information and so forth, are we going to become more reliant on them? Are they going to insist, in fact, that they become more influential in Australia as a result of those bases and the alliance that we have with them? So there's many things that we in Australia need to be cautious of in relation to the US. Climate change. Well, in Australia, we're working very hard in order to, whether some people like it or not, but we're working at building those windmills and creating solar energy throughout Australia and becoming less reliant on fossil fuels. So we are working towards those things, but at the end of the day, unless the United States is doing its bit, then we're in trouble. And they won't. There will be an effort in the United States, as far as we know, because of the way Trump thinks, that the idea around climate change, according to Trump, is a hoax. And I think that is extremely damaging to the world in general, because they will continue the pollution, continue the reliance on fossil fuels, oil in particular, and gas, and that will impact our environment, everybody's environment as well. And then we have the appointment, and I guess this will be my final point. We have the appointment of people like Kennedy Jr. And, what would that mean if he gets appointed as Secretary of Health or whatever? He's a conspiracy theorist. We'll be allowing him to be able to control, or they will be allowing him to control what happens in their health system, and vaccines will be ruled out because they're damaging to people, according to him, and the water will be allowed to be polluted even further because he doesn't believe in anything that's going to purify the water. So there's a whole host of issues around him. And then, of course, there's Elon Musk. Elon, I believe as a result of this election, the other day he made billions of dollars from his investments and portfolios and stuff, and Tesla, I guess, and everything else he's involved in. So, is he the man that's going to be able to audit the American system? Does someone like Elon Musk really care about those people that are on Social Security benefits? Does he care about anybody else but himself? It's going to be an interesting time. Now, I'm inviting you to join me and Avery at around 3 o'clock Australian Central Standard Time to have further conversations about all of this. I'm quite sure Avery will have an interesting perspective. Let me know what you think if you watch this later in the comment section below. If you can, just add some comments that we can take up when I talk with Avery later on this afternoon. Please let me know. In the meantime, please remember to subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for further notifications. Do you find any value in these live feeds? The jury's out as far as I'm concerned, because I don't get many people to actually connect. But let me know. And if you want to participate in any of these feeds also, let me know. I can organise for you to come on screen and we can talk about some of the issues if you wish. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, get back to me at 3 o'clock and we'll have a chat then. In the meantime, be safe.